States. Our co-chair, Reverend Dr. William Barber II, who came to Mississippi to let Mississippi Poor People's Campaign know that we're not in this fight by ourselves, that they're fighting with us from North Carolina, from Massachusetts, from Minnesota, all 46 states that are part of this campaign, they're fighting, and they have Mississippi in their hearts. And so I just want to, again, welcome and thank Reverend Barber and the team that came with him. I want to thank all of the speakers, all of the impacted people that are here that are brave enough to tell their story, and all of the impacted people that are standing out here in the audience here to listen and that represent the 1.3 million poor and low wealth here of the state of Mississippi. Thank you all so much, and we will continue to move on with the program. As follow, I will read off the names of the program. We're still waiting. As our mayor arrived, he isn't here, so we're going to go ahead and move forward. We will have a prayer and greetings, prayer by Bishop Jenkins, Thomas F. Jenkins. Pastor Jose Rodriguez is our faith leader, immigrant leader. Deborah Thomas is an impacted woman here with the Mississippi PPC. Benny Ivy of Strong Arms of Jackson. Ollie Taylor, which is the family of Courtney Rainey. Giselle Newsom, trans woman activist. Sharon Brown, tri-chair of the Mississippi Poor People's Campaign and lead organizer of the Mississippi Prison Reform Coalition. Raquel Lumumba, advocate, People's Advocacy Institute. Justin McCreary, who will close us out, Mississippi PPC faith leader, pastor of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Jackson. Thomas Jenkins, Bishop Thomas Jenkins.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day and the many blessings of it. Father, we ask today that you would bless our time together today, because God, it's time for a new day in Mississippi. Our people have suffered far too long. We've been on the bottom all 66 years of my life. And God, we pray today that everybody will realize that it's a new day, it's a new destiny, and it's a new determination. Bless our time today. In the mighty name of Jesus we pray. Amen.
Pastor Jose Rodriguez.
Good to see you. Hello, everybody. This is a blessing to be here, be able to have the opportunity. Good Lord, give it us today to be here and try to discuss and talking about the issues affecting our communities. And our communities, whatever affected me, affected you. Whatever affected you, affected me. So we don't need to see every issue different from one another. If you remember in 2019, here in Mississippi, be specific, August the 8th of 2019, we have experienced the first immigration rape in the state of Mississippi. We never thought that would happen here in Mississippi, but it happened. The first day at school, when the kids went to school, they expect the parents to pick them up from the school. And guess what? It was not parents around, because there was an incarcerator. There was in a detention center, because immigration rape did what they did. And they divide our families. They separate the kids from the parents. So you and I know separate the kids from the parents. It's not a good thing to do. But they did it. So when the kids come back home, it was no parents around. It was just neighbors. It was just preachers from the church. It was teachers from the school that was able to go and give them and put them in a safe place, because it was no parents around. So that's one of the main issues affecting Mississippi right now. And if you think there's just issue affecting immigrants communities, it should not be that way. We're supposed to be together on this fight. We're supposed to get out there and asking for help. So here I am today. I am today here and let you know it was a struggle what we faced in 2019. It was hard. It was a horrible experience. I wish I was never have to experience that, but I did. I have to get out there and fight with them. But without Poor People Campaign and other organizations, we can help them. We're able to make it through, and we're still fighting, because there was not the end. This is just the beginning of the fight. Thank you so much, and God bless you.
We will now welcome our mayor of the city of Jackson, Mayor Chokwe Antar Lumumba.
How are y'all doing this afternoon? You can do a little better than that. How are y'all doing this afternoon? Listen, it is a pleasure to stand here with my brothers and sisters in arms of the Poor People's Campaign. It is a pleasure to stand with my friend, Brother Reverend Barber, as we talk about how we defend human rights for human beings, as we talk about how we defend our right to have an electoral process which is just, so that people are not violated and taken advantage of. We're talking about the same things in 2021 that we were talking about in the 70s and the 60s and long before that. And so as we understand, as we continue to see progression, as we continue to see movement, we have to understand that the opposition does not go home. The opposition does not rest. The opposition continues to build and regather and regroup itself in order to oppress people. We have to understand that the worst form of violence is poverty. Poverty is the worst form of violence that continues to take advantage and continues to exploit people in every single way. And so our mission, as we continue to talk about all of the social dynamics that we don't like to see in our community, the best way to address it is to end the cycle of poverty that continues to put our communities in cycles of humiliation, cycles where they continue not to see the health care that they need, cycles where they continue not to see the education that takes care of our children, cycles where people don't have the basic needs that they have to have and acquire in order to take care of their families. And so we need to build whole communities. And that is the way that we will rid everything that we don't want to see in this city and beyond. And so I'm happy to stand with you. Please take my official greeting. Sorry, I got caught up in the moment and didn't do my official role of greeting you to the city. But know that I love you. I stand with you. And you are my brothers and sisters. And I'm happy to be here with you. Thank you very much.
Deborah Thomas, African-American woman, mother of 11, resident of Jackson, Mississippi. At the age of 20, I was convicted as a first-time offender for shoplifting. I was sentenced to do 5 years in Mississippi Department of Correction. The first-time felony conviction has permanently disenfranchised me as a voter in the state of Mississippi. Since my conviction and release from prison, I have been denied access to low-income subsidized housing, which has made providing for my family, provide adequate housing for my family, serious challenge. The felony shoplifting conviction from 18 years ago until this day keep me from being hired and making a living wage at any decent job that I qualify for. My luck with job has only been housekeeping and chicken plants, which tells me after making one bad decision in Mississippi, my life worth is only good enough to clean another man's trash. Due to COVID-19, I was forced to leave my job as a housekeeper. Since this pandemic, this year alone, I have faced even greater hardship being impacted by the winter ice storm in Mississippi. My family and I had to go without water for 2 weeks. And to this day, we still do not have clean drinking water. I am grateful for Danielle and Mississippi Poor People Campaign and Rakia Lamama and the People Advocacy Institute, who came into my community to let me and my neighbors know that we didn't have to wait on the Mississippi government to rescue us and that they were there to help us, help each other. While this storm was bad, meeting these young ladies have been life-changing in just a matter of weeks. Today, I believe I am somebody. I never in life imagined the feeling of living like I was in a third world country, fetching for water out of barrels just to survive. The leadership in Mississippi government has failed many individuals like myself and more. I want better and I deserve better. I want to be able to work and provide for my family. I want to be able to make enough money to care for my family and to not have to work multiple jobs just to make ends meet. I want to they soon be a resident with a voice and vote to count in the electoral process. This is why I will join the Mississippi Poor People Campaign, Mississippi Prison Reform Coalition, and the People Advocacy Institute in the fight to restore the formerly incarcerated voting rights at the ballot box. Forward together, not one step back.
So y'all, what Deborah did not mention to you all was Deborah was one of the it was 40 suffrage bills that went through legislation this year. Deborah was only one of the 2 that actually came out and got her voting rights restored back to her. So while Deborah voting rights has been restored, she's here to fight for those other tens and thousands of individuals across Mississippi who have permanently been disenfranchised. So we celebrate Deborah's victory. However, the fight continues. Benny Ivy.
Yeah. My name is Benny Ivy. I'm gonna make this as quick as I can because I've been known to be long-winded when I talk about stuff like this. To begin with, my name is Benny Ivy. I'm co-director of the Strong Arms of Jackson Credible Messenger mentor program we have in Jackson. I'm a part of the People's Advocacy Institute. I'm a business owner of Benny Ivy Plumbing and More LLC. I'm a standing member of Move Church in Pearl. I'm a father to a beautiful daughter, a husband to a beautiful wife. I did 11 years in prison, right? As a juvenile, I shot dope and smoked crack with my parents at 16. I become a 16-year crystal meth addict. I graduated from training school, went to prison, did 11 years in prison. I tell you that because I've been clean now 11 years. I've built a life for myself. I've built a life for my family. I co-direct a program to keep young men and young women from going down the same path that I did, and I still can't vote. What more do I have to do? What more do all the tens of thousands of people have to do that have transformed our lives, transformed our minds, done something with ourselves, but we still can't vote? That tells me that our word don't mean nothing. That tells me that our opinion don't matter. Our voice don't count. They got me messed up, bro. Right? Because I'm going to continue to come up on these places like this, and I'm going to continue to go wherever I'm sent, wherever I'm asked to come to make my voice be heard. Because if I can't go to the ballot box on election day, I'm going to come to this podium right here, and we're going to continue to make noise until somebody does something. Right? So I just want to encourage everybody to get involved with the People's Advocacy Institute, get involved with the Poor People's Campaign, get involved with the Strong Arms of Jackson. We got so many good men and women involved in all these organizations and all these programs and all these projects that we're doing, man. And most of us been to prison. Right? Get involved, man, because this stuff counts. This stuff makes a difference. God bless y'all, man.
My name is Ollie Linson, and I've been asked to speak up on behalf of Courtney Rainey in the Courtney Rainey case. First of all, I got to say that never in my wildest dream, never in my life would I have ever dreamed that I would share the stage of such an esteemed individual as Reverend Barber. I'm a MSNBC watcher, and when he talks and when Joy Reid talks, I'm listening. Okay, about 2 years ago, Courtney Rainey was convicted of what Madison County wanted to say was a voter fraud, but that was knocked down, so it wound up being witness intimidation. And that judge gave her 15 years for this. Now, I sit on the front row in that court every day, and my summation of that trial and that court is, you're talking about egregious. Well, that was flagrant egregious. I used to referee basketball, and if I had my whistle, I would have blew the whistle, and I would have gave a flagrant foul to Madison County judicial system, and I would have expelled them from the Mississippi judicial system. Now, what can we do for Courtney right now? Courtney's in CMC, and she's going through some health issues. The young lady entered prison as a 30-some-odd-year-old healthy individual, and now she's going through all these these changes with her health. So what we can do right now is we could pick up the telephone and we can get on our computers and do whatever it takes to talk to that commissioner and to because the Supreme Court has already has reversed her decision. And what I want to say is thank God for the Supreme Court and the appellate courts, because they saw that garbage. And I mean to tell you, like I said, I was on the front row in the court, and it was nothing but a trash can full of garbage. Now, let me just take a minute and tell you how she got there. Now, I don't want to use the term too lightly, because I don't want to say man, because I don't consider him a man. But when you're in an election and you lose the election, go on about your business. But this individual decided to follow this lady around with her child day and night, just documenting stuff. Then he took that garbage to the prosecutor's office. I have a copy of it. I saw it. I have a copy of it. And then what came out of that was indictment, and then it was she had to go to court. But I say that this is so egregious that we should never forget something like this, because you know what? Who's next? You, me? So let's do our due diligent, and back Courtney, because she will be out, soon. And just remember, if it happened to her, it could happen to you. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. You all may not know me, but I am Giselle Noel Newsom, and I have been an activist here through HRC and My Brother's Keeper for over a decade. And I have been fighting for not just LGBT rights, but poor people rights and subsidized communities as well. And one of the things that I would want y'all to know is I left for a while because I just could not survive as a trans person. But due to the violence, and due to the poverty, and due to the discrimination, and due to the things that all of us have to go through as far as being trans, and not only that, being Black, and not only being Black, but being dark-skinned Black. And if you dark, you know what I mean. So I left and went to California. And then I didn't realize that during my prison stint of being in MDLC, that I had some medical problems that had been untreated, and had no idea that I was having so much kidney damage until I realized that, oh my goodness, I was in prison all them years and nobody ever told me that I had these health risks or had high blood pressure or had this and that. And now I'm currently now on kidney dialysis. So now I finally make it to California. I'm living my dreams. I have the career of my life. Got my master's and everything is back on track and leaving prison behind me, so to speak. And so I get so sick that I have to come back home where I come from on dialysis due to the negligence of MDOC and due to the negligence of our misappropriated funds in this city. I have to sit up here and be here. And if I'm going to be here, then guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to fight. Because see, what y'all don't understand is the reason why we have this much crime. Because I'm trying to figure it out. I was like, everybody has moved to either Atlanta or Dallas. Everybody gone. So why do we have this much crime in a city this small? You want to know why? Because no one has thought to raise minimum wage in the last 20 years. It has been $7.25 for 20 years. Do you understand that some people want to go out there and help their mamas pay their rent? Some people want to go out there and help their parents sit up here and pay their bills. And sometimes they got to go for what they know. Some of these people may not want to be robbing and killing and stealing like they're doing in these streets. But if you can't even get out here and work a job or two to make a decent wage, what do y'all expect these young people to do? There is no more Boys and Girls Club like Talk About It. We ain't got no basketball teams like Talking About It. We don't have extracurricular or anything for talent, for kids to dream anymore. The only dream they got is social media. The only dreams they got is the rap music. So then when you see it on the street, you're wondering, well, what's going on? Well, what's going on is the people that are in office have been gatekeepers. You've been check fillers. You've been making sure that some people get certain benefits and some people don't get certain benefits. You've been holding everybody back. You have not shown equality or equity within this community. And it's time for it to change. Everybody wants to say, vote the mayor out. Vote the mayor out. Do this, do that. It's not one mayor's fault. This has been going on for decades. This has been going on since the Great Flight. So ain't no sense in y'all sitting up here trying to go all the way back to Harvey Johnson and blaming him. Then you want to blame Tony. Now you want to blame Drake. It's not about that. It's about the gatekeepers that are still in office, that's been in office, that holds the puppet strings for those that claim they have most of the power. And it's time for it to stop. We have people at MDOC dying. There's no reason why we should still be holding people in prison that are sitting up here on the kidney dialysis barely living or needing surgeries to survive. It's a shame on how this city has treated poor people, thinking that it's classism. When it's not classism, it's actually universal, because all of us are sitting right here, right on these regular streets, whether you in North Jackson or South Jackson. And that's all I got to say.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sharon Brown. I'm one of the chairs for the Mississippi Poor People's Campaign and lead organizer with the Mississippi Prison Reform Coalition here in the state. There is something about systemic suffering when it's rooted in poverty. There is something when mothers' tears wash away our blood-stained sidewalks because there are no resources to raise healthy men who have been damaged from oppression, a system of oppression. There's something about systemic suffering when it's rooted in poverty. When a young woman who fights on so many levels cannot go and receive adequate health care so she can continue the fight. Something about the suffering, the systemic suffering that has been intentionally kept in place through policies that create havoc and violence within our communities. It is not the leadership that's the problem. It's the policies that they create that kills us. See, they understand they had to replace the noose with the pen. I'm going to say that one more time. If anybody don't understand the exchange of the noose for the pen, I'm gonna need for everybody to get some type of understanding about what systemic suffering rooted in poverty looks like. That's what we're going through. It's not the administration's fault. We need to really come out of the valley of dry bones. We need to rise up, you guys, because our healthcare system, our education system, our criminal injustice system is only the old plantation and slave patrol reincarnated to keep people in oppression and in poverty. And let's be clear, oppression and poverty does not care about the color of your skin, because I know just as many of my white sisters and brothers who live extremely below the poverty line. So it has no color. It's time for us to wake up and understand that until we hold our legislators accountable, they create this political violence against its own citizens, then nothing will never change. But a few of us do understand what policy does to communities, how policies will allow our Black brothers and sisters and people of extreme poverty to be hauled off in the war on drugs. And then when you get them there, we as taxpayers have to bear the brunt and burden of your inhumane treatment. And let's be clear, Senate Bill 2795 does nothing. I will say that again for everybody who's advocating for Senate Bill 2795 to be passed. Only 600 and some odd folks out of thousands will have immediate relief. And I will say that again. You cannot stick the pacifier in our mouths any longer and think that will pacify us and keep us quiet and say, oh, they're doing a good job. They're passing policies that's for the people. That is not the case. When people do their time and they come home from prison, they have to pay taxes, but they can't vote. I've never heard of that. I thought if I paid taxes, I can have representation, right? But they cannot vote. And then the process that you all have in place here in Mississippi goes through the process, and year after year, no one never gets their voting rights back. And the two that did get theirs this year, I thank God that you all did. But for me, it's not enough. I'm not satisfied, because it should have been every application that has gone through. And so in that vein, with that being said, since you guys will not, refuse to allow people to get their civil rights back after they have done the time, you sentence them to the time, they've satisfied and come home, and they still live in abject oppression. And all of that is Jim Crow dressed up in a $5,000 suit. A convicted felon. It's ridiculous. Jesus, it's ridiculous. Anytime, if you look, a convicted felon rights mirrors the rights that former slaves had, and that's none. So it's just reincarnated. So what we're going to do as an organization, as members of society, we say our sisters and brothers need their voting rights back. They have done the time. Release them so they can come home and get a fair job to raise their children. So they can remove the X off of their back, because they did the crime and they have done their time, and it's time for them to be released and restored. Thank you.
I came here today from North Carolina through Memphis, Tennessee, to stand with the Mississippi Poor People's Campaign and all of you and all the organizations that have joined in this fusion coalition together. And I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be in the heart of the South, where people are still fighting, as they used to say, to make sure the South has a heart. as I sat there and listened, and I know today, Danielle and all you who have spoken, you've written a bill, right, that you're delivering. And a what? A ballot initiative. We want a ballot initiative in Mississippi for people to vote on felony re-enfranchisement. I think about the text in the Bible that says, woe unto those who legislate evil and rob the poor of their rights and make women and children their prey. Isaiah 10, verse 1 through 3. And then I think about Jesus, Matthew 23, as I was coming down and I saw all the churches around the State House. But I couldn't help but remember what Jesus said on the way to the cross. Woe unto you who tithe even a tea leaf, and you pay attention to all the ritual, but you leave undone the weightier matters of the law, which is justice. My sister, you're so right. It's just James Crow Esquire, Jim Crow dressed up in a suit. And we've come here today to stand with all of you in this fight that is not just a Mississippi fight, but a fight around the country for felony re-enfranchisement. I want the folk listening, there are hundreds of thousands of people listening on live stream across the nation and the world right now. 5 years for a first-time shoplifting. That's evil. 15 years for allegedly intimidating somebody. 15 years, that's evil. I've been out of jail 13 years. I've built a business. I'm helping with individuals. You heard the brother. That's sin. Our trans sister says, listen, I went in and I got sick, and people are getting sick in prison who ought to be out. And then I come out and I do all the things, even get a master's degree. And yet they still try to lock me up by keeping me from the ability to vote. And my sister, you said it exactly right. Taxation without representation is unconstitutional. It's un-American. It's ungodly. So I'm here today to stand with you. 46 states are standing with you. Our co-chair, the Reverend Dr. Liz Theoharis, and all of the tri-chairs around the country, steering committee, are standing with you. But I've also come here to do something else, to make a national announcement from Mississippi. And we're going to come back when COVID is better. But when we relaunched the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival 3 years ago, we commissioned a study, and we learned at that time there are over 140 million poor and low wealth people in this nation. And all of them are impacted by 5 interlocking injustices that you can't separate. You can't just deal with one and not deal with the other. Systemic racism in all of its forms: Black people, brown people, Asian people, Native people. Systemic poverty, ecological devastation, and the denial of health care, the war economy, and the militarization of our communities, and the false moral narrative of religious nationalism that tries to teach us, wrongfully teach, that if you're against a woman's right to choose, you're against gay people, you're for tax cuts, you believe Jesus was a founding member of the NRA, and you vote for a certain party whose name starts with an R, that somehow that's a godly position, and it is not a godly position. It is not biblical. And so today I'm here to announce that the Poor People's Campaign, our 46 coordinating members, states, hundreds of organizations, over 2,000 clergy and faith leaders, we will hold this June 21st a second mass poor people's low-wage workers assembly and moral march on Washington virtually. Last year we did it in June, and we had 2.4 million people showed up. 2.4 million people tuned in via live stream, TV, radio, phone. It was because of COVID that we didn't go to DC. So we're going to gather again this summer. But on that day, virtually, we're going to launch a 365-day mobilization for an in-person mass poor people's low-wage workers assembly and moral march on Washington in June of 2022. It's time for poor and low-wealth people to flex our power. And we are committed on that day to put poor and working poor voices at the center of the national agenda during the midterm election, because we know that we must lift from the bottom. And if we lift this nation from the bottom, then everybody rises. Poor and low wealth people are organizing to demand a moral and economic agenda that lifts from the bottom, that guarantees a true measurement of poverty. Oh, because the measurements are off. They tell us in the government way it measures poverty. It says if you make $12,800 a year, you're not poor. Yeah, I know it makes you want to cuss, doesn't it? Yeah, it really does. Huh? So we need a true measurement. We need living wages beginning with $15 an hour. We need universal health care. We need full investment in education. We need guaranteed incomes. We need a big infrastructure plan with labor and union rights that targets poor and low wealth communities with environmentally safe jobs. We need full and protected and expanded voting rights. We need the restoration of the Voting Rights Act and pre-clearance so that none of these legislators can pass laws without them having to be pre-cleared by the Justice Department. We need an end to felony disenfranchisement, an end to police brutality and murder. We need fair justice of immigration reform. We need full protection and justice for indigenous people. And we need fair taxes and a repeal of the 2017 regressive tax cuts. And we need to redirect the bloated military budget to education, health care, and infrastructure. Do you know right now in this country we spend nearly $800 billion a year on the war economy? Most of it goes to war manufacturers, weapons manufacturers. And if we were to cut that budget in half, we would still have more money in our military budget than Russia, North Korea, China, Iraq, and Iran combined. The 140 million poor and low wealth people in this country, 43%, they live in every region. I'm going to give you some numbers. Now, every state is accounted for, and some of them are double counts because of the regional identities, but I want you to hear this. There are 50 million poor and low wealth people in the South, from Alabama to Texas. A third of all poor people live in the South. A third of all white poor people live in the South. There are 40 million poor people in Appalachia, in the Appalachian Mountains, with 8.6 million in New York alone. There are over 40 million in the southwest border states, Arizona, California, Colorado, with 20 million of them living in California alone. There are 20 million poor and low wealth people in the Midwest deindustrialized states, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Indiana, Michigan. There are 11 million in the Northeast states. I'm not calling every state, I'm calling the region. And there are over 7 million poor and low wealth people in the Northwest, Alaska, Idaho, places like that, Minnesota. There are nearly 7 million poor and low wealth people in the Great Plains, Iowa, Kansas, states like that, Montana. There are nearly 700,000 poor and low wealth people in Hawaii, and over 300,000 poor and low wealth people in the nation's capital in Washington, D.C. Down here in Mississippi, 52% of all the people in Mississippi are poor and low wealth. Notice I said 52% of all the people. 1.5 million residents is the new count. 59% of the children, 437,000. 53% of the women of this state, 816,000. 67% of people of color. That means only 23% of black folk, people of color in this state, are not considered poor and low wealth, 843,000. And 40% of white people are poor and low wealth, in this country, 668,000. And many of our white brothers and sisters are realizing that we have to back away from racism, because racism connects to economic injustice, and you can't keep one race down in the ditch unless you stay down in the ditch with them. When it comes to systemic racism and its relationship to poverty, voter suppression is alive and well in Mississippi. And in Mississippi, 19,192 people are in prison. Almost 65% are people of color. And black residents are incarcerated at 3 times the rate of white residents. In Mississippi, there are 61,000 veterans who have low wealth incomes below $35,000. People that fought for this country come back and they're poor and low wealth. 31% of Mississippi's veteran population is poor and low wealth. In Mississippi, there are almost 1,500 people that are homeless. In Mississippi, you have to work 82 hours a week at the minimum wage just to afford a basic 2-bedroom apartment. In Mississippi, there are 588,000 workers that make under $15 an hour. 53% of Mississippi's workforce makes less than $15 an hour. And that's the second highest in the country in Mississippi. In Mississippi. And in the country, 62 million low-wage workers make less than $17 today. And the March on Washington in 1963 demanded a $2 minimum wage, which would be $15 today if it had been passed 57 years ago. And what causes this? My sister was right. Unjust systems of neoliberalism that says all you got to care about is the middle class, or trickle-down economics that says you just give the wealthy all the money and they'll let a little bit trickle down. In Mississippi, 514,000 people participate in the food stamp program, white, black, and brown in Mississippi, a state that refused to expand health care. There are 51,900 people that are uninsured, even in the middle of a pandemic in Mississippi. 37% of the census tracts are at risk for being unable to afford water. That's the 5th highest rate in the nation. In Mississippi, the richest 1% of Mississippi residents receive 28% of the benefit of the 2017 Trump tax cut. The average tax cut in 2027 will be $3,880, but the poorest 20% are expected to have to pay $160 more than they've been paying. And talk about militarism. Mississippi's contribution to the endless war in Iraq and Afghanistan has cost this state $27 billion. That $27 billion could have created 21,500 new jobs in clean energy. That $27 billion could have placed every Mississippi child in Head Start, early childhood education program. That $27 billion could have covered the cost of Medicaid for 357,000 adults for the past 17 years. As Dr. King said, any nation with its military budget determines its politics more than caring for people, that nation is on a spiral to a spiritual death. Mississippi has spent, listen at this, $1.4 billion in public tax money to get corporations here, but they haven't required those corporations to pay a living wage. And they block union rights for the workers. And these realities are not a sad accident of apolitical market forces. It is the predictable outcome of intentional policy choices that are aimed to redistribute economic leverage and bargaining power upward and away from the poor and low-wealth people of this nation. And it's time that we say no. And it wasn't one piece of legislation. It was an accumulation in the nation of dozens of hundreds of policy choices. made in the form of legislation. We did a study with the Economic Policy Institute, and they said this has come about because year after year after year after year, regulatory changes, administrative changes, bad laws have put a thumb on the scale to ensure that the wealthy have more and the poor and low wealth have less. And then the pandemic hit. All that I said to you, that was prior to the pandemic. 140 million people poor and low wealth prior to the pandemic. Then the pandemic hit. And over 550,000 people's lives have been lost. One study at Columbia University said 60% of the people didn't even have to die if we had made different choices about masks. 30 million workers have lost their jobs or either significant hours of work. Nearly every state has had a drop in revenue and tax revenue that's going to threaten social programs and jobs. There's no mystery about it. The reason the pandemic hit so hard, the reason it exposed racism and poverty, because the country was already hit hard before the pandemic. Before the pandemic, 750 people died every day from poverty. 250,000 people. 250 million people died every year from poverty before the pandemic, and then the pandemic hit. Before the pandemic, 80 million people in this country were either uninsured or underinsured. And since the pandemic, the first bill that was passed in Congress, 84% of the money went to corporations and banks. We didn't have the kind of rent freeze we needed. They gave people a moratorium on the rent, but this is what it said. We're going to give you 3 months you don't have to pay, but in the 4th month, you got to pay all 4 months. There was no moratorium on utilities that didn't come with a penalty. You know what you went through right here in this city with the water freeze. And so people got penalized. People are having all kinds of credit problems now. But the corporations, on one occasion, got over $1 trillion that didn't even come through Congress. Didn't even come through Congress. And so here we are. Here we are. And a study came out just the other day, my sisters and brothers, that said where we are in America right now is only 39% of Americans can afford a $1,000 emergency. That means 61% of Americans, if they have a $1,000 emergency, it will put them in economic ruin. And if America does not address what's happening with a visionary, long-term, enduring social and economic policy, the very health of the entire nation is at stake. We could end up with 50% of the people poor and low wealth. And that's why poor and low-income people and their allies, we must change the narrative. We must put a face on these realities. We must build power, and we must register votes. It's a lie that we have a scarcity of money. We don't have a scarcity of money. We don't even have a scarcity of ideas of how to fix it. What this nation has is a scarcity of will and a scarcity of conscience, and we are the ones that must change that. We must show America herself, and we must have a movement of the people to change the consciousness of the nation that will say without ever quitting that if the policymakers don't change course from one-shot policy activism, we're going to face more and more economic peril. We need a long-term economic policy that addresses all 5 interlocking injustices, that establishes justice and rejects decades of austerity and builds strong social programs and makes sure that we promote the general welfare. We've got to have this movement, y'all. We cannot be still or quiet. We have to speak out. There's a great scripture in Isaiah 58. It says, cry loud and spare not. There comes a time that nobody else can say what needs to be said on your behalf but you. And that's why we're announcing this virtual mass poor people's low-wage workers assembly Moral March on Washington virtually again this year. And then for 365 days, we're going to mobilize every truck, every car, every bus, everybody that we can to the nation's capital. And when we get there, we promise you, it will not be people speaking on behalf of poor and low-wealth people. But just like you saw today, it will be poor and low-wealth people speaking on their own behalf, telling their own story, saying what the policies what must be, and then letting folk know this other thing, that God has fixed it so that now 1/3 of America's voting population is poor and low wealth. 1/3. That's 65 million people. 65 million people. And if we change the narrative and build power, if we have a mobilizing movement and an organizing movement and a sacrificing movement and a state-based strategizing movement and an agenda-pushing movement and a moral focusing movement and a voting movement, and we may have a protest movement and we may have a civil disobedience movement, because we can't take this anymore. You can't just ignore 140 million people anymore. And poor and low-wealth voters represent 30% of the voting population, 65 million people. And let me tell you this, and I'm through. In 15 states right now, if poor and low wealth people organize between 1 and 22%, that's all, not 30%, 1% in North Carolina, 4% in Florida, it's about 16, 18% here in Mississippi, that if 1 to 22% of poor and low wealth people organize around an agenda, not around a candidate, but around an agenda, and then check which candidate is closest to the agenda, that poor and low wealth people, hear me now, poor and low wealth people could determine the margin of election for Senate, for the presidency, and even for state houses in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, New Hampshire, Arizona, Minnesota, Maine, Florida, New Mexico, North Carolina, Nevada, Georgia, Texas, Mississippi, and Ohio. And I think it's time that poor and low income people flex their power. I think it's time that we say we won't be silent anymore. I think it's time we say somebody's been hurting our brothers and sisters too much, and we won't be silent anymore. I think it's time that we say we've not had health care too long, and we won't be silent anymore. We've been without living wages too long, and we won't be silent anymore. We've been blocked from the right to vote too long, and we won't be silent anymore. And that's why we wanted to come to the hollow state of Mississippi, deep down in the South, to say that the Mass Poor People's Assembly and Low Wage Workers Assembly and Moral March on Washington will rise. We'll rise from here and all over this country, virtually this June, and in person in June of 2022, because we will not slip into the darkness silently. This nation has to change. This nation will change. And for us, it doesn't matter if you're Democrat, Republican, or independent. If poor and low wealth people's issues are not on your agenda, then you are failing in your office to do what you promised to do. Do you know, as I close, freedom is not in the Constitution. You ever notice that? Freedom is not in our Constitution, but justice is. And there's a reason why. If you establish justice, you got to have freedom. You can't have people in the bondage of poverty and have justice. You can't have people in the bondage of sickness and have justice. You can't have people in the bondage of voter suppression and have justice. So if you establish justice, and my brothers, that's what we mean when we say the healing of the nation. Even our Constitution says it like this: you must first establish justice in order to get to domestic tranquility. It doesn't say we come together, more perfect union, to ensure domestic tranquility. It says to ensure the establishment of justice, then ensure domestic tranquility. And then you hold on to tranquility by fighting for the common defense, promoting the general welfare, and then later on in the 14th Amendment, you provide equal protection under the law. Now, can I tell y'all what that means? No justice, no peace. That's all it means. Huh? And if that was good enough for the original people who wrote the Constitution, then it's good enough for us. Forward together. No justice. Forward together. No justice. This nation must address the issues facing poor and low wealth people. And we must do it now. Poverty, we must address it now. Systemic racism in all of its forms, we must address it now. Ecological devastation that hurts poor communities, we must address it now. Denial of health care, we must address it now. The war economy, militarization of our communities, we must address it now. The lies of religious nationalism, we must address it now. Somebody's been hurting our brothers and our sisters far, 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 far too long. And we won't be silent anymore. Forward together. Not one step back. No justice. No peace.
No justice, no peace. Forward together, not one step back. Greetings to everyone, to the thousands and thousands of people that are joining us today, joining us in Mississippi and joining us online all across the country. As you already heard and will continue to hear, we are the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. And we are building power, strong, bold, visionary power among the 140 million people who are poor, or one storm, one healthcare crisis, one job loss, one emergency from economic ruin in this, the richest country in the world. And from Mississippi, like we started today, to Michigan, from California to the Carolinas, we're committed to lifting from the bottom so that everybody may rise. I want to ask everybody that is tuning in online to make sure that you take action together with us. You can call your senators. You can send messages to our elected leaders by going to poorpeoplescampaign.org and following the prompts there. And make sure you add your voice on this Moral Monday, as we do on every Moral Monday, taking action together. Dr. King, as people might know, announced the 1968 Poor People's Campaign that was organized by welfare rights activists, indigenous activists from Appalachia and Chicago and Washington State and California, all across the country. He announced it with a mule train from Mississippi. And what he said is that we ought to come in mule carts, in old trucks, any kind of transportation people can get their hands on. People ought to come to Washington, sit down if necessary in the middle of the street and say, we are here. We are poor. We don't have any money. You have made us this way, and we've come to stay until you do something about it. So at this moment, We want to make sure that Mississippi and this entire country knows that we're in this together.
People ought to
I want to let state leaders building in states across the country who are committed to this online assembly and the in-person, generationally transformative moral march on Washington to be able to call out, to talk about how we're moving forward together and have our voices heard and known. So to get us started, I want us to welcome Reverend Tani Algood from Alabama to say that you're here in this roll call.
Greetings in the struggle from Alabama, committed to 500 days of fighting forward. We will see you on June the 21st. Always forward together, not one step back. Love y'all.
Much love, Alabama. And now I want to welcome India Donald Ford from Arkansas.
Arkansas is committed to 500 days of fighting forward. We'll see you on June 21st. Forward together and not one step back.
Thank you, Arkansas. And now Nell Myhan from California.
Thank you, Reverend Dr. Liz Theoharis. I'm here to tell you that California will be there online June 21st, and we're coming to DC for a mass Poor People's Assembly, the Poor People and Low Wage Workers Assembly and Moral March on Washington on June 18, 2022. And we're going to be bringing unpaid caregivers and mothers because we're overrepresented among the poor and we have been hurt far too long and we won't be silent anymore. So we'll see you.
We won't be silent. Now, Neil Bernstein from Colorado.
Thank you, Reverend Theoharis. Colorado's committed to 500 days of fighting forward. We'll see you on June 21st. Forward together, not one step back.
Forward together, indeed. I welcome Charito Calvachi Mateko from Delaware. Thanks so much for being in this roll call.
Well, Delaware will be there online June 21, and we're coming to DC too for a mass Poor People's and Low Wage Workers Assembly, and also for the Moral March on Washington on June 28, 2022. We are in this together.
We are in this together. Welcome Dan Jones from Florida.
Florida is committed to 500 days of fighting forward. We will see you all on June 21st. Forward together, not one step back.
And we're not taking any steps back. Welcome Jamel Hill from Georgia.
Yes, hello everyone. Georgia will be there online June 21st. And Georgia will also be there in DC with everyone else as we come together for the Mass Poor People and Low Wage Worker Assembly and Moral March on Washington on January 18th of 2022. Together, forward together, not one step back.
We'll be there most likely in January, but we'll also be there in June. Forward together, not one step back indeed. Joyce Brody from Illinois. Welcome.
Thank you, Reverend Liz. Greetings to everyone. Illinois is committed to 500 days of fighting forward. We are excited to see you on June 21st. Forward together, not one step back.
Rod Hollinger Jansen from Indiana. Is Indiana in?
Indiana is indeed in. As Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King said more than once, we are all woven together in a single garment of destiny. Indiana is committed to 500 days of fighting forward. We'll see you on June 21st, forward together and not one step back.
Forward together, forward together. Eileen Sambos from Iowa. Is Iowa going to be in the numbers?
Yes. Since I am part of the Iowa Poor People's Campaign, our demands must be heard. Therefore, we will be planning for that march on Washington, June 18th, 2022.
Fantastic. Now we move to Kansas. Welcome to Mary Jane Shanklin and Mark Pringle. Is Kansas on board?
We are all in here in the Sunflower State, Reverend Liz. Thank you. Kansas is committed to 500 days of fighting forward, and we'll be seeing all of you on June 21st. And it's always said, we always say this in our campaign, forward together, not one step back.
Indeed, indeed. Mary Downhauer from Kentucky. Is Kentucky going to be there?
You betches, Reverend Liz. Kentucky will be there online June 21st, and we're coming to DC from the holler to the hills for the march on the Washington DC for the Mass Poor People's and Low Wage Workers Assembly and the Moral March on June 18, 2022. See you there.
Fantastic. Aubrey Trout from Maine.
Yes, greetings from Maine. Most moral of Mondays to you. We most assuredly will not shut up until our demands are put up, and so we will show up, and we will do just that on June 21st. And you bet your bottom, from the bottoms that we rise on. Sorry, I got we will be coming to D.C. for Mass Poor People's and Low Wage Workers Assembly and Moral March on Washington, June 18th, 2022.
Fantastic. What about Maryland? Reverend Angela Martin.
Reverend Liz, I tell you, from the mountains of Appalachia to Baltimore and down through the DMV and to our luscious Eastern Shore, we are committed to 500 days of fighting forward, and we can't wait to join everyone here in the DC area for June 21st. We can't wait. We're on board.
Fantastic. Cape Toussaint Scarborough. Is Massachusetts in the numbers?
We are. Massachusetts is committed to 500 days of fighting forward. We'll see you on June 21st and in Washington on June 18th, 2022. Forward together, not one step back.
Not one step back. We're moving to Minnesota now. And all of this nation's hearts are on Minnesota, as it is also in Mississippi. Vivian Henry, do you have a message for us today?
Hi, Reverend Liz. Thank you. Minnesota will be there online June 21st, and we're coming to DC for a Mass Poor People's and Low Wage Workers Assembly and Moral March on Washington on June 18th, 2022. Fight poverty, not the poor.
That's right. Fight poverty, not the poor. Paul Jones from Missouri. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Paula from the Show Me State, and we are committed to organizing for 500 days of fighting forward, and we're also going to be there on June 21st, and we're organizing for the big fallout on June 2022. So thank you. One step forward, not one step back.
That's right. That's right. Angela Matalvo from Nebraska.
Hey, Reverend Liz. Nebraska will be there online on June 21st, and we're coming to D.C. for the Mass Poor People's and Low Wage Workers Assembly and Moral March on Washington on June 18th, 2022. Forward together, not one step back.
Not one step back. Owl Smith, is New Jersey in the numbers?
Yes. Imbu Masawakanam, Miniwachoni, Water is life, as to be translated in English. We walk in the ways of water. We are committed to 500 days of fighting forward and going forward together, not one step back, with the people of New Jersey. We're also in New York as well, but I won't speak for them. I'm only speaking for New Jersey. So forward together, not one step back. Thank you.
I think you speak for the people of New York as well, as does Jamel Hudson. Welcome from New York, Jamel.
Hello, Reverend Liz. Hello, everyone. My name is Jamel Coy Hudson. I'm an artist with the New York State Poor People's Campaign, and New York will be there online June 21st. And we're coming to D.C. for a mass poor people's and low-wage workers assembly and moral march on Washington on June 18th, 2022. I'll be there. New York will be there, and we look forward to seeing you there too. Forward together, not one step back.
North Carolina, Ashley Carrington. Is North Carolina going to take part in all of this?
You bet. Thank you so much, Dr. Liz. We're so excited. I'm Ashley Carrington from North Carolina, and North Carolina is committed to 500 days of fighting forward. So we will see you June 21st as well as June 18th, 2022. Forward together, not one step back.
Not one step back. And I'm really excited today to welcome Mary Aguilera from Ohio, who has been fighting this fight for a long time, including in this pandemic. And so, Mary, is Ohio in?
We're in, and the Ohio Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, like our Kentucky sisters and brothers say, from the hood to the holler, is committed to 500 days of fighting forward. We better see you virtually on June 21st and in person for the Mass Poor People's and Low-Wage Workers Assembly Moral March on Washington on June 18, 2022.
Fantastic. Let's hear from Oklahoma now. Marion Smith.
Good afternoon, Reverend Liz. Oklahoma is very committed to 500 days of fighting forward. We'll see you all on June 21st. And as always, forward together, not one step back.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. I want to welcome Pennsylvania, Margaret Caro.
Hello, Reverend Liz. Pennsylvania is committed to 500 days of moving and fighting forward. We'll see you on June 21st. Forward together, not one step back.
Fantastic. Reverend Carl Jefferson from Rhode Island. Do you have a word for us today?
Well, good afternoon, Reverend Liz. And yes, we do have a word today. We want to stand with all of the states to continue to commit to the 500 days of fighting forward, to say not now, not here, not ever, not on our watch. For we will see you on June 21st, forward together, and definitely not one step back from the city, the state motto of hope. We're standing with all the other nations. God bless you, Reverend Liz.
God bless indeed. Marina Lopez from South Carolina.
Hola, Reverend Liz. I am so happy to be here to state that South Carolina is committed to the 500 days of fighting forward. We are going to see you all on June 21st. And juntos para adelante, ni un paso atrás.
That's right. That's right. Thank you so much, Marina. Now I introduce Lisa Rung from Tennessee.
Thank you. Tennessee will be there online June 21st, and we're coming to D.C. for a mass poor people's and low-wage workers assembly and moral march on Washington June 18th, 2022, because everybody has a right to live.
Amazing, amazing. Stephanie Wilkes from Texas.
Thanks, Reverend Liz, and greetings to all my brothers and sisters. Texas is committed to 500 days of fighting forward, and we will see you on June 21st. Forward together, not one step back.
One step back.
Not one step back. Virginia, Raven Witherspoon, are you all in? Are you going to be in the numbers?
We are in. We believe that everybody has a right to live. So Virginia is committed to 500 days of fighting forward. And DC is only a hop, skip, and a jump. So we'll absolutely be there June 21st, June 18th, 2022. Forward together, not one step back.
Not one step back. Karen Schneider from Washington.
Hi, greetings, Reverend Liz. Well, Washington is ready to rise and flex our power with y'all. We're committed to 500 days of fighting forward, and we will definitely see you online on June 21st. So, as we say, forward together, not one step back. Thank you.
Thank you. And Washington, D.C., our nation's capital that we're fighting to become a state in this process. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Reverend Liz. Washington, D.C. is committed to 500 days of fighting forward. Just this week, the U.S. House of Representatives will vote for statehood for D.C., bringing us closer, one step closer to full democracy. We look forward to welcoming you to the 51st state in June 2020. Forward together, not one step back.
Not one step back. I now want a special welcome to Pam Garrison from West Virginia. Pam, do you got a message for us today?
Oh, yes. West Virginia, the Mountaineers, guys, we're committed. 500 days of fighting forward. We'll see you on June 21st. We'll see you in D.C. Forward together, guys, not one step back.
Oh.
Thank you, Dr. Liz.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. And the last state on our roll call is my home state. And so I have great, great, great love and honor for introducing Bruce Grau from the state of Wisconsin.
Yes, on Wisconsin, we are committed to our 500 days of fighting. We'll see you there on June 21st. And with all us Badgers, I want you to say with me, forward together, not one step back.
Well, all of our states and so many more are on board. We are organizing, we're fighting forward for 500 days. We're going to do more. We're going to mobilize, we're going to organize, we're going to register and educate people for a movement that votes. And we are going to be in those numbers as we march online on June 21st and march in person on June 18th, 2022. And so it is powerful to be with everyone today. I want to remind people one more time to make sure that you take action. We have to stand against the filibuster. We have to update this poverty measure. We got to make sure that we're fighting for health care and for a care economy and for living wages and for all of the priorities of this campaign and of the 140 million poor and low-income people in this country. We're going to close out today, this Moral Monday, with a powerful message, a powerful song from one of our state leaders. Forward together, forward together, forward together, not one step back.
Thank you, Liz.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Forward together.
Forward together.
Not one step back.
Or together.
Not one step back.
I took back what he stole from me. I took back my dignity. I took back my humanity. Well, I went down to the rich man's house and I took back what he stole from me. I took back my dignity. I took back my humanity, and now it's under my feet. It's under my feet. It's under my feet. It's under my feet. Ain't gonna let no system walk all over me. Oh Lord. Oh Lord. I went down to the rich man's house. I took back what he stole from me. I took back my dignity. I took back my humanity. Well, I went down to the rich man's house and I took back what he stole from me. I took back my dignity. I took back my humanity, and now it's under my feet. It's under my feet. It's under my feet. It's under my feet. Ain't gonna let no system walk all over me. Oh Lord. Oh Lord. I went down to Washington, D.C. I took back what they stole from me. I took back my dignity. I took back my humanity. Woo! I went down to Congress and I took back what they stole from me. I took back my dignity. I took back, yeah, 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 yeah. Ain't gonna let no system walk all over me. Have mercy, Lord. Have mercy on me, Jesus. I went down to Washington. I took back what they stole from me. I took back my dignity. I took back my humanity. Woo! I went down to the state capitals and I took back what they stole from me. Look here. Every state in the nation, every state in the nation, we gotta go. We gotta go. We gotta go. We gotta go. Ain't gonna let no system walk all over me.
See you in Washington, D.C. Forward together, not one step back. God bless.
Thanks, Jamal.